Graham, you've had a very long and stellar career in the manufacturing industry and in corporate Australia. What's your feeling on the future of manufacturing in Australia, given what you've seen it go through in recent decades?
It's a very good question, and there's a lot of talk about advanced manufacturing being the future. Well, I don't disagree with that. I define it a little differently, and I think certainly manufacturing will change. We've lost the car industry. There'll be other parts of manufacturing that can't compete in this country. But it's not just about advanced manufacturing, it's about areas where we have a competitive advantage. And for example, where we have technology, as we do, for example, in BlueScope's ColourBond and Zincalume, we've got a clear world-leading technical advantage. We can manufacture that in Australia and will do so. But where we're just another player, and the steelworks is a good example of that, there we have to be ruthless about getting cost out of the business, and that's the big challenge for the organisation going forward. So we will have manufacturing in this country, but it will be different and the footprint of it will change, and we're in the midst of that at the moment.
And what about government? Do you think that government, the way that they're responding to changes in these sort of sectors is improved from the past, or is there still more to do there?
I think it's easy to blame government. Really, business needs to take responsibility themselves and get on and do their own thing. Where government's an obvious impediment, and there are a few areas where it has been, then focus on that, but don't expect government to cure all the issues, because they can't.
The BlueScope board recently visited the company's operations in China. What are your impressions of the state of the Chinese economy and its future and its influence on global steel markets?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and John Bevan and I were actually in Shanghai with our Chinese management team last week, so at -1 degrees, so that was a chilling experience. But the answer to your question is I've been a long-term fan of China. I started business there 35 years ago, and the growth that I've seen over that 35 years is nothing short of phenomenal. Where we are today, though, is they're going through a transition, just as Australia's transitioning from a resources-led boom back to a more traditional economy, rebalancing. So too is China, and they're rebalancing from an investment-led boom to a consumer boom. What does that mean? It means that there's still plenty of growth in China, and people who say there isn't really are used to an easy life, in my view. There is plenty of opportunity when you consider that China in the next year will add to its economy the equivalent of a whole Indonesian economy. So there's plenty of opportunity there, but it's not as easy as it was. You have to be a little more creative, find different channels to market, and be nimble. But I think still plenty of opportunity for Australian businesses going into China. But the other side of your question is that Chinese transition having an impact globally? Absolutely, and we've seen it obviously in steel prices, iron ore prices, but broader than that. And if the yuan gets added to the reserve currencies, to the world currencies today, we'll probably see another bit of adjustment around the world. So China has a big impact on the world economy.
Now, you had 13 years in the chair at BlueScope. And there's been some real highlights and some very difficult times, particularly the global financial crisis and the aftermath. You've been there for all of that. Looking back, what's your sort of reflection, if you can, over that period?
Yeah, you put the question very politely. Highlights and difficult times. Well, lowlights perhaps, but. The interesting thing is, I think in the first 5 years of separation from BlueScope's demerger from BHP, we performed very well, had a 1 year of a profit of over $1 billion, and we were convinced that this was because we were pretty smart, that we had good strategies, and the separation from the parent had been a good thing. While that was undoubtedly partly true, the big issue was global steel prices, global steel spreads were at the top of the cycle, and life was much easier than it subsequently became. So I think if I look back on it, I think the fundamental thing for me was we didn't see the first change coming in the GFC, and we scrambled. We scrambled pretty well, but we had to scramble to right the ship. this second time around, which is really steel prices, steel spreads, we've been ahead of the curve, and I think that's particularly pleasing.
What would be the one lesson that you think you've learned from going through such a changed environment?
Oh, I think the key thing is probably the strength of the people throughout the organisation, starting with the board, the senior management team, and the employees. Very resilient, and with some good leadership, they respond extremely well. And that was really, I guess, first brought home to me when we scrambled to close a blast furnace. The Nippon Steel chairman said to me, "Graham, that was the best closure and most effective closure of a blast furnace we've ever seen." I thought, well done to the team. I knew it was good, but I didn't realise it was that good. So there's that capability, and I think that the board and management through that first crisis and since then have been very focused, challenge each other at the appropriate times, but focus on what is the main game, which back then was survival, and today for a period it was still pretty tough. Focus on the main game, many nice to do things, but don't get sidetracked. Board and senior management led by Paul O'Malley have been very focused on the main game, and that's been really important for the organisation.
And we've seen, that sort of, the need to cooperate very recently in Port Kembla. So you feel that culture of, driving, working together is something that's entrenched in this company now?
Entrenched, no. I think it's still got a way to go, but it was very good to see the approach at Port Kembla, where everybody got behind the challenge, and whether it was the management a requirement to take some cost out, whether it was the union stroke workforce willingness to accept some sacrifice, or government, all of those players contributed. So that was, I think, particularly encouraging, but importantly it's really the start, and it's really how effective we are, and I still say we, but how effective BlueScope is going forward in really taking advantage of the greater flexibility in the workplace that comes from those new arrangements. That'll be the key, and it will be very important. They're certainly capable of doing it. I'm optimistic they will.
You spoke at the last AGM at BlueScope. You spoke of your admiration for employees' dedication to safety and the safety performance of this company, which I know is very key to it. What's your, in hindsight, looking back over the changes there for BlueScope?
Well, not just in safety, but more broadly than safety. But clearly, safety is number one priority for BlueScope. We're a world leader in the steel industry. We're the safest manufacturing company in Australia, and that's because we're paranoid about it and continue to strive for improvement. I think there's a number of important elements in that. The engagement between management and the workforce is an area that always needs further improvement, but one of the great ways to engage with the workforce is safety. There are no competing objectives. Everybody wants zero harm as an outcome, so engagement with the workforce on safety is a key driver of not just the safety piece, but a broader engagement on other things that are positive for the company and positive for the workforce.
So life after BlueScope and your listed corporate career, I suppose, might be winding back a little bit. What are the things that you'd like to do for yourself in the future?
Well, they're in two broad categories, Mary. One is just to give a bit back to the community. So I've for not-for-profit, I've joined the advisory board, Australian Advisory Board of the Nature Conservancy. I've joined the ANU's advisory board for their centre on China and the world, and I do quite a bit of mentoring of young people. I'll continue to do that. So that's one piece, and the other piece is with more time with my wife, a few more holidays, seeing more of our kids, who are two of whom are based overseas, and a little bit of golf.
All right, well, I wish you well.
Thank you.